Hello and welcome back to Budget Modern, your source for modern legal MTG decks for about $50 or less. Today we'll be covering a deck that I like to call Heroic Assault. This is part 2 of our 3-part Heroic deck tech list. This one is the Mono Red list, the first one was the Mono White, and our following one will be the Red White deck. Let's jump into the deck list, shall we? First off, we're running 22 copies of Mountain, and then we'll jump into our 18 creatures. 4 copies of Akroan Crusader, single red casting cost, for a 1/1 with Heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Akroan Crusader, put a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste onto the battlefield. This is good for swarming your opponents. Every time that you target Akroan Crusader with a buff spell, and can hopefully flood and outspeed your opponent. Next up, we have Satyr Hoplite, single red casting cost for a 1/1. Heroic, whenever you cast a spell that targets Satyr Hoplite, put a 1/1 counter on Satyr Hoplite. This is a good card to help obtain a permanent buff on him and continuously allow him to grow. Next up, we have Arena Athlete. 1 generic, 1 red casting cost for a 2/1. Heroic, whenever you cast a spell that targets Arena Athlete, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn. This is a good card for evasion, especially if you drop a card like Fist of the Anvil on it. Make it into a 6/1 creature. Hopefully your opponent only has 1 creature that they could normally block with. Make it to where they can't block, and swing for a nice 6 points of damage. Next up, we have Akroan Linebreaker. Yet again, 4 copies of this for 2 generic and 1 red casting cost for 2/1. Whenever you cast a spell that targets Akroan Linebreaker gets +2/+0 and gains Intimidate until end of turn. Yet again, a nice buffing creature with evasion. And for our final creature in the deck, this one we're only running 2 copies of, Akroan Conscriptor. 4 generic and 1 red for a 3/2. With Heroic, whenever you cast a spell that targets Akroan Conscriptor, gain control of another target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. This is both a built-in effect of evasion and control. That way you can hopefully take your opponent's biggest threat and turn it against them until end of turn. So let's move on to the spells in the deck. We'll be running 4 copies of each. First off, Titan Strength, single red casting cost, instant. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn, scry 1. Great as a good buff, plus you get a small peek into your future. Help decide your fate. After that, we have Brute Strength, single generic and 1 red. Instant, target creature gets +3/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. Good buff, plus the trample for a nice breakthrough from their blockers. After that, we're followed up with Fist of the Anvil. 1 generic and 1 red casting cost for an instant, target creature gets +4/+0 until end of turn. Nice cheap buff that can deal quite a bit of damage. After that, we have Temur Battle Rage, a card that I'm sure several of you are very familiar with. For 1 generic and 1 red, instant, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. With Ferocious, that creature also gains trample until end of turn if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Which in this deck, with all of your different buffs, you have a very high chance of triggering Ferocious. And moving on to our final card in the deck, this one's an enchantment. Thunderous Might. 1 generic and 1 red casting cost for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, it gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is your devotion to red. This is a nice pseudo-permanent buff that, with the amount of cheap creatures you're running in the deck, should be able to get you up there pretty high. So if you liked this video and would like to see more of our content that we'll be producing in the future, or would be interested in seeing the final piece of this heroic series of deck lists, please click that like and subscribe button down below, or check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/budgetmodern. We'll see you next time.